latest episode of Absolute Candor. This time we are reviewing Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3, Episode 2, Wedding Bell Blues. Now, this could not be a greater contrast from the episode we were given last week when we reviewed Hegemony Part 2, wrapping up the Gorn conflict. I suppose for the foreseeable, at least that's what we know at this stage. Wedding Bell Blues, a complete, but also very in character, tonal shift for Strange New Worlds, which have now stripped it right back, made it really character focused, and we're centering now on kind of the fallout of Spock and Chapel's relationship kind of breaking apart at the end of last season. Spock obviously still very much harboring that ongoing love for her, but we also know from the Lower Decks crossover that Chapel is then sort of spoiled in a way by Boimler's arrival and him sort of pointing out how Spock, she's not factoring into his life in the future, so she knows their relationship is doomed, and has led her to another classic original series character. We had a couple in this episode, actually. It was very, very TOS heavy in terms of references and characters, etc. Dr. Roger Corby, who's a character that does appear in the original series. We're seeing him in his much younger form here, as then Nurse Chapel's girlfriend, and of course then hijinks. I think that's the best way to describe this episode. Hijinks that ensue. I was a bit uneven on this one at first. I didn't feel as confident going into this, particularly the first few scenes. I wasn't too sure about some of the comedy in it. It didn't quite land for me. Until we then got the Trelane involvement and we got that kind of flip. I just found some of it a little bit awkward early on. But the actor playing Trelane, by the way, just his costume is a huge homage to the trickster from the original series, and who mess with Kirk, McCoy, and Spock on a planet. The costume is very, very in keeping with that style, and it even has elements of his costume flourishes in there on his design. Brilliant portrayal. I thought he was a really, really good fun character. We then got that sort of fun little, slightly meta Easter egg at the end of the episode that his dad, the sort of floating, that in itself was quite a fun reference, I think, just a floating cloud. There was no real detail to that, but that Trelane's father was voiced by John Delancey, who of course played Q. There's been a long-standing, not from the producers, it's just entirely from Star Trek fandom, is that Trelane in the original series was a member of the Q Continuum, and that was just sort of Q before Q was a thing. And having John Delancey, I think, voice his father, it was never explicitly stated they were part of the Continuum, but it was a nice little nod that I thought put the button on an episode that I did find a little uneven in parts. The comedy didn't always quite land for me, but certainly the back sort of 15 minutes, I think it really clicked and it was enjoyable. But there was some of it I think just made Spock look a bit stupid, and not in a this is a funny because he's like his human and Vulcan self kind of wrestling with each other, or it just made him look a bit dumb and a bit petty, which was a shame. I think his characterization was a bit off in this one. Nothing to do with Ethan Peck. I think his performance was great, but yeah, just a bit uneven for me, this one, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say with Q, like you got to a stage in TNG where anything unusual happened, it's like, yes, Q, and it kind of, even I'm still in that mentality because I've watched TNG through in the last few years, so it was really nice to see. I actually really liked this episode. This for me is perfect Star Trek. This is I like the previous episode. Hegemony was great, but it's like I can take or leave stuff like that unless it's like an epic, story arc where there's one episode that's a battle and then they're like getting ready for it and it's all the repercussions of it and stuff.
The Zindi arc, I suppose, would be a bit like that. Yeah,
having everything crammed into like an hour or two and it's just full action isn't really what Star Trek is for me. So I really love this kind of a bit stupid, putting the characters in weird situations because they're in space and weird stuff happens. I kind of get what you are saying about it's weird in a way because obviously the whole concept of the episode was that everything's flipped. So it's like, but only two of them initially know that. So kind of coming to terms with that and adapting to that, I think it wasn't written in the best. It was just a bit jarring, I think.
Something
And
that tripped me, I think, was
I think would have been done better. But overall, some of the writing otherwise was really good. There were some really nice one-liners from a few of the characters reacting to
yeah, and
bits
actually,
and pieces
definitely
were excellent.
definitely a few sort of improv moments in there too. I think certainly from Trelane, I think he had a couple of little extra lines that felt like they were just in the moment. They felt quite spontaneous, which was really fun. I think we're at what jarred me a little bit was, as maybe I just didn't pick this up, but I wasn't clear why Spock and Corby were the only ones that didn't realize what was that realized what was happening. It wasn't clear why it was those two specifically that were aware.
Sorry, my headset's just gone.
Oh, it's alright. Quick cut. You all good? Saying some words. Saying some words. I'm hoping that you.
I don't know if that's good. Well, I've obviously got the microphone, so but I don't know if that's actually charging. Let me check.
Your voice is still coming through, okay?
Yeah, that should be right.
Yeah, nice.
Sorry about
that. That's all right. So I wasn't immediately clear as to why Trelane and Spock were the only two that were aware of this. Again, it might be something that I missed, but I just wasn't clear on that. That felt a little jarring in parts too. I wasn't really. It kind of became a distraction for me for a sort of middle chunk of the episode to why they were aware.
Well, they had that bit where they were trying to work out because it was when was it Spock tried to punch him?
Yes.
And then Spock realized, so they were wondering if it was either like the emotion of that of trying to punch someone, or because they're both in love with Nurse Chapel, and so they like spent the next 10 minutes trying to work out, they were trying to get who was it? I forget. They went around the crew trying to wind people up.
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to make them angry, which was quite fun. But that in itself is a bit far-fetched. As far-fetched as it can be in a sci-fi show where this is the premise. But it didn't feel like a particularly good explanation, even in the scheme of
it was just a bit odd, and it didn't. I didn't know whether it was just because he punched him. Like, it was really, really unclear what the reason was behind that. So that kind of sucked a bit of the enjoyment out of it for me. What I will say though is that certainly I would say the last 10-15 minutes, particularly the wedding scene. First of all, the costume design and the makeup or the action stuff. The cast looked fantastic. Their elaborate wedding outfits. They looked stunning. And it was really cool. The costume department just went to town on this episode, and I thought that because it's a different kind of production value that I think we sometimes, and I know I certainly do, is when I'm watching this show, I am often like we said it last week, didn't we, about the idea of the first episode feeling like a movie, that sometimes we fixate so much on the effects, but actually forget like just the sheer number of extras they often have in these episodes, and the set dressing, and specifically in this case the costuming, I thought was outstanding in this episode. They looked brilliant.
Yeah.
And very sort of evoking almost the sort of TOS kind of very classical, like a 60s show extrapolating the future. It felt like that. It didn't feel modern. It felt like it was evoking that look and that era, which was really fun actually to see the characters out of uniform and in those outfits. I also just really, really enjoyed the sort of I was surprised I liked this, but the Spock La'an, is there something there with those two?
Well, yeah, maybe.
There was because he was doing the dance practice with her, and there's a little something. There was a bit of chemistry there with those two, which I think is really interesting.
It'll be good. Help. Like, I don't think we want Spock and Nurse Chapel to be, we don't want it to be one of those shows where they're just fixated on each other and then not. And so I think it would be good for the story if that ends up being a thing. And that was a nice kind of separate little thread to the story. I think their interactions.
I think it is worth acknowledging, and you've touched on this a bit already, is that we don't, because of the 10 episode season, we don't get episodes like this in New Trek, really.
I know. So after I watched the first episode, I was ready to come in and be like, as great as Strange New Worlds is, I miss just like the sheer level of character development and the level of downtime that you get with longer shows with longer production. But then I was like thinking back, we have had a lot of episodes like this in Strange New Worlds. It isn't like 10 episodes of combat. It's
No, my God.
maybe half and half, or even less, mate. Like it's not an action heavy show in the way that Discovery is an action heavy show.
Well, Discovery serialized. It's breakneck pace. It's getting to the next universe-ending disaster. That's what that show is, and that's fine. That works for what that show is trying to be. But Strange New Worlds, I'd argue, like 6 or even 7 episodes of a season would probably skew more towards, like, I mean, they did a musical episode and a Lower Decks crossover. They're all character-driven. Even though there was a threat within them, that they're still character-focused, and that is largely what this show, what I wanted it to be. So I think maybe I'm comparing it more to just this current streaming era of Star Trek generally. When you look at what we've actually got in live action, I mean, you've got, Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds. They're kind of our three, and Picard had no time for anything like this ever, and Discovery certainly didn't. So the fact that Strange New Worlds, even with the same episode count, is able to have those moments and make it, I think maybe this is why, and we've talked about this before off air, how the extended cast of Discovery, I didn't feel like I knew them. But I feel like everyone, even actually to a certain extent Ortegas, especially the flirtation with Uhura and her brother and that stuff in this episode was really fun.
Was good,
just fun to see Uhura with a new look and she's taking aboard that thing that Mariner taught her from last season about trying to relax and you can still do your good work. I still feel like even Ortegas, who traditionally I think has been a bit underserved, we addressed that a bit last week, she herself is getting some really nice moments, and we're getting those hints as well of her still struggling from the Gorn as well, which was really nice.
It's a nice carry through. I think compared to Discovery, like Ortegas would still be, especially amongst the bridge crew, like in the top 3 bridge crew for like screen time and character development. So we're still. I agree. She's the least utilized, but still, it's done a good job of all the main cast, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we are starting to see more of her this season. I've noticed that she's piping up a bit more. She's a bit more involved, and actually seeing her interact with. Thinking back to the first episode, seeing her interact with Number One and having that sort of bit of friction there, I think is really cool.
I think but potentially number one is underutilized. I think the show leans a bit too heavily on Spock, which it's understandable. I think just because of how Spock as a character and how the actor can sort of carry the show sometimes. But last season, especially with him and Nurse Chapel, it was almost relentless character development of those two. So hopefully this kind of ties that up a little bit, and we'll see.
And I mean, La'an was the big redemption arc for me with season 2. I think she ended up becoming really fleshed out and really interesting by the time season 2 finished. So having her now,
was very one-dimensional, wasn't she?
Up to that
in
point,
season 1.
So even though I don't think it's a particularly strong episode, it was actually the alternate history Kirk episode where they're just in Canada, just doing a cheap bottle episode. It was actually that episode that started that changing that tide for me with her a little bit. So actually her, and it makes total sense. It was not strange to me that she was interacting with Spock like this, and that there's a little something in there between the two of them.
If any two characters were going to interact like that, I think it makes sense because their personalities are quite similar. She's got a very sort of closed,
very stoic
personality. Yeah. So it's logical that they would get on well.
Excellent. Didn't even pay you for that. Which is great.
Yeah.
But no, I agree. I think it's a nice, again, doubling down on what this show does best, but also even within a 10-episode structure, allowing us to have that time with these characters. I'm certainly more invested. I care more. And even in episodes like this, which for me just didn't land as well, I still think that the character moments are what shine through. And it meaningfully, I think, actually, I quite liked Corby. I quite liked Dr. Corby, and I think he was very well cast. I think he was it made sense that him and Chapel, I mean, they had chemistry together, and that it actually was him and Spock. Their pairing worked really well. I really liked Trelane just constantly putting him down as well during the wedding rehearsal.
The rehearsal.
The rehearsal was probably my favorite.
And it's like, go and stand over there.
Goes, and he's just in the extreme background, which is really great. I actually would love Trelane to pop up again. I don't know whether he will. I think that certainly could be a one and done. But again, Strange New World is not afraid, unlike Enterprise was in its first 2 years. Because let's not forget, Star Trek Enterprise was just called Enterprise for the first 2 years. It was so afraid of being tied to the franchise that for some reason was a real point of contention for them. Strange New Worlds has gone the other way. They've lent really heavily into the canon and evoking TOS, and I think that's to its credit. I think that's great, But so long as the nostalgia says something new. That's always been my thing with that, and that's where Star Trek Picard Season 3 works so well for me, because they weren't just sort of, lovingly beholden to TNG. Characters meaningfully moved forwards and took steps, and that's what I'm hoping we see again from Strange New Worlds as we inevitably get towards the first part of the original series. One thing I forgot to mention in last week's episode actually was another Comic-Con announcement. It's relevant to Strange New Worlds, is that the producers have actually got a formal pitch for a show called Star Trek Year 1, because the original series isn't the start of the 5-year mission. He's about 2 or 3 years in. So they've basically said, we've got these sets, almost the entire cast of the original series that these younger actors will be in place by the end of Strange New Worlds. They are actively pitching to the new owners Star Trek Year 1. That was going to be the approach they take. So it could be interesting there to have all these sort of this love for TOS. If that doesn't happen, we're going to get some really nice references and moments to celebrate that show, which is
there was
really good fun.
There was one line in this that I just thought was brilliant, which was, I think, when they were talking about why Corby was not affected initially, and then obviously why Spock was not affected, and it was like maybe it was my intelligence that is the reason why, and then Spock was like, if either of us was going to be immune, it wouldn't be you. And then Corby did like the Vulcan eyebrow thing, and there was a little flute in the Star Trek flute.
Yeah, like because it's a funny moment. Yeah. No, I agree. There was some nice. Certainly, their interplay was kind of the stronger elements of that. It's just I didn't enjoy Spock as a sort of put out jealous ex. I didn't enjoy that in the beginning. I think that was just a bit immature for his character. It just didn't really work for me. But certainly by the time we wrapped the episode, I think it ended very much on a positive, and I thoroughly enjoyed Trelane's meddling in the crew. So, folks, that'll wrap it up for our second episode of Absolute Candor, covering Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3. You can find us on all of the various socials at Burly Bird Media across Facebook, Instagram, Threads, as well as YouTube, Podbean, and Spotify. Also, please jump into our Discord community. We've got a really great, lots of engagement going on over there, so please jump in and check it out. Mike, where can people find you?
You can find me at thexbotsguide.com and at the Xbox Guide on Threads and Blue Sky.
Given that we're also currently covering Star Trek Strange New Worlds as part of our Absolute Candor Critical Review podcast, I would be remiss if I didn't shout out Plasma Conduit, our Star Trek podcast, where Mike and I are randomly selecting an episode from the entirety of the Star Trek universe and then recapping and revisiting it with fresh eyes. The new episode of actually just went up today as this episode airs, so please do consider checking that out. And folks, thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Yeah.